Supah Ritz, Volume 2, Chapter 5, Expense Accounts, a.k.a. Herb Spotzel, and Les Deux Cafés. During the summer before I set out for Hollywood, when I was trying to understand what Hollywood was even about, I watched, at Marty Bregman's suggestion, Robert Altman's film, The Player. I hadn't watched a lot of movies at that point in my life, and I can't say I even really understood what the film was all about. I took away from it a vague pastiche of Hollywood life and a distinct sense of wonder that so many scenes unfolded in restaurants. It was particularly strange to me, yet everyone in the place always seemed to know each other. As Tim Robbins would make his way from the hostess station to his table, he'd stop at other tables to press the flesh and wave to people across the room. It felt surreal to me, like some kind of joke. I had never experienced anything like it in my life. Every time I went into a restaurant, I knew no one. The only comparable phenomenon I'd ever experienced in my life was at a country club, where you could walk into the dining room and reasonably expect to know most of the people sitting down for a meal. But when I got to LA and got a little deeper into the business, I discovered that Robert Altman's film was entirely accurate. Hollywood in the 90s was a wildly social place, and much of that social activity took place in a handful of restaurants orbiting the various studios and agencies around town, where the entire industry sat down for lunch every day of the week, precisely at 1 p.m. That collection of restaurants was its own sort of club. You didn't need letters of reference to be accepted. You just needed to know where to go and an expense account to cover the bill. One of the very first perks we received at Phoenix Pictures, as soon as the financing came together, was a company-issued corporate credit card from Diners Club International. It was a silver card deposited on my desk in a blank business envelope without preamble or guidance. We were never told how it was intended to be used or what limits it carried or restrictions. I guess there was an assumption at the company that we all understood what was expected of us. We were supposed to get out on the town and meet everyone. The corporate card gave us access to the club, and it was up to us to figure out how to make the most of it. I started out using my card hesitatingly, only bringing it out for the most important, legitimate expense, a young writer I was trying to woo, a senior exec capable of helping me along. But as my expense reimbursement requests went wholly unquestioned and unchallenged, the lines of what defined a business expense grew vaguer and more malleable over time. Eventually, I found myself expensing just about every meal I ate in Los Angeles, and I don't think I personally paid for a single meal out for the next 5 years. What's more, my friends and my girlfriend got kissed into the ride. If I was at the table, I was picking up the tab. I became so accustomed to reaching for the bill, it took me years after my expense account ran out to stop instinctually doing it. To be fair, most of my social life was, on some level, business-related. I was trying to get ahead. I was trying to get out and meet all the right people. I was trying to use my expense account to get in the right rooms. I was also trying to make friends, meaningful relationships that would enhance my business life and hopefully enrich my personal life as well. While I never really succeeded in befriending powerful people, stars, their agents, or their producing partners, I did make friends. And some of those friends also happened to be valuable business connections who went on to impressive careers. But even with those people, the ones who went on to great success, when they went out with me, not a lot of business got conducted. If we went out on a Monday night, guzzled 4 goblets of dark red wine in the penthouse at Bar 360, it didn't really matter what we talked about. I couldn't remember anything the next day anyway. The truth is that when I first landed in LA, I relished my anonymity. I had spent my entire life before Los Angeles in a narrow corridor of East Coast privilege. And while I had never tried very hard to branch out beyond my rarefied world, it had begun to feel like a cage. Whether I was walking down the streets on the Upper East Side of New York or Palm Beach or Southampton, I was constantly spotted by people I knew bellowing out my childhood diminutive, "Nikki!" It's not just that I hated my name. I hated this feeling that I was trapped in an identity thrust on me by my upbringing. I wanted the freedom to become something new, to invent myself in my own image. I didn't know what that image might be, but I at least wanted the opportunity to figure it out. Los Angeles, where nobody knew me, felt like it afforded that opportunity. I knew I could walk into any restaurant in town, and there was basically zero chance that anyone would know my name. But in reality, I had grown up in clubs, and part of me really enjoyed that sense of place and belonging. On some level, I missed it, and I used my expense account to gain membership to the version LA had on offer. Was it right? Was it what my bosses intended? I'm still not sure, and I had no guidance anyway. You go to Le Colonial on a fun Tuesday night and trade air kisses with 12 development girls? Is that business? It felt like business to me. Maybe on most nights nothing happened, but on some nights someone might mention that Jeff Welch short, and give you an excuse to call Doug McLaren at ICM, and you'd actually do it and read the script, and it would be amazing, and you'd show it to your bosses, and you'd be a hotshot for a day. It felt important to be out on the scene in Los Angeles. It felt important to be seen and press the flesh so that when you did need something from someone, you could call them up without hesitation. After all, you just waved at them from across the patio at Penne Vino. You were practically besties. But as I did start to make real friends, it started to feel like all those meals that were getting picked up by my company were more social meals than business meals. It was sometimes hard to tell. I remember one night eating at Mimosa on Beverly with my future wife, Mary, and her brother, and some friends. And when I went to pick up the tab, Mary's brother protested politely, "You can't do that." I was like, "This is business." "Steve's a big deal," I told him, pointing to future Academy Award winner, current nobody, Steve Gagin. "Yeah, right," he laughed, mocking me. "Steve's a big deal. Whatever." He let me get the bill. And a few months later, Mary and I were sitting at the bar at Hamburger Hamlet on Sunset, enjoying, I'm sure, a quiet dinner on the company, and watching the Emmys as Steve Gagin and his then writing partner, Michael Perry, picked up an award for NYPD Blue. My cell phone rang. It was my brother-in-law. He was watching the Emmys, too. "I guess Steve is a big deal," he quipped. And that was partly the thing. You never knew who might blow up, so who's to say who is worth taking out to dinner and who is not? Still, everyone in Hollywood with an expense account felt that our spending had to somehow be justified. One night I was having dinner at the Ivy on Robertson, where patrons happily paid $40 for a slice of meatloaf back in the day. It was me and my roommate and a bunch of women who held executive positions at various production companies around town. There was no real business being conducted, though I'd like to think we were bonding. Bonding so hard I cannot remember the name of a single person at that 8-top table. The head of Scott Rudin's company picked up the tab. He rolled his eyes as he signed the sizable chit. I'll have to tell Scott I had dinner with fucking Madonna. No one at my company, though, really seemed to care. After all, I was just adhering to the norms of Hollywood in the 90s. The only time I ever got called out at all for my expense report was when I started submitting all my coffee orders from the Conservatory for Coffee, the only high-end coffee spot in all of Culver City. It was right next door to our office. The shop was run by a family who all worked there. Dave, the patriarch, AJ, his devoted son-in-law, AJ's wife, and her sister. This was the early days of the espresso craze, when Starbucks was still a luxury and just beginning to take over the world. The Conservatory was a next-level cup of joe, and it was hard for me not to spend my entire paycheck there. I started keeping a charge account, and at the end of the week, they'd give me a bill, and I just started submitting it as if it was a meal. I'm sure I bought some work coffees there. The Conservatory, like any place in Hollywood regardless of how nondescript, had more than its fair share of legit industry traffic. I remember once standing in line there, reading some bad script, and Paul Verhoeven, the director of Total Recall, one of my favorite films, was standing in line behind me. Verhoeven asked me what I was reading, and I told him. It was an unconventional ghost story, and the logline was pretty good, even if the screenplay was terrible. He shot me a sardonic look before his face erupted in a smile. "Now you can tell everyone Paul Verhoeven is interested." And we both cracked up at how absurd Hollywood could be. Still, I doubt I picked up his coffee, and after submitting a few ginormous coffee tabs, my accounting department called me in to explain the expense. Even they knew you couldn't buy a meal at the Conservatory for Coffee. I was mortified, but claimed it was an innocent error and wouldn't do it again. I didn't, but I sadly then needed to modify my coffee intake to keep from going broke. But after that single check on my spending, my expenses went largely unchallenged, and I found my own definition of what amounted to a business meal, expanding steadily. If I was out with my girlfriend at some trendy spot, and I saw an agent or manager across the room, and we traded a wave, or even if we didn't, it was business. And maybe it was. The dues required to maintain a spot in the club. I'll tell you, I felt a lot more comfortable calling up J.C. Spink for a spec he was going out with if I'd just run into him at Campanile. In fact, I ate at Campanile, Mark Peel's La Brea Bistro, famous for its Thursday night grilled cheese menu, so often that when I made a reservation, they would put 5 ballpoint stars next to my name. They started bringing us free appetizers every time we ate there, and it became a game for my wife and me to see if there was a limit to how far Campanile might go to accommodate us. Let's show up on Mother's Day, their most lucrative brunch date, with no reservation, and see if they'll seat us. They always did. Eventually, a group of us at Phoenix Pictures became really close friends, and we started to eat out together regularly. Was this a legit business expense? I don't know. Surely we talked business between cutting imitations of our bosses. We built team spirit that could prove invaluable when the shit hit the fan. Who's going to support you when all the male extras in Brian Singer's At Pupil are claiming they were forced to strip naked for the high school shower scene? It's the guys you got pie-eyed drunk with on Friday night at Il Sole, where you almost elbowed Michelle Pfeiffer in the gut on your way back from the men's room. We ate all over town. For food alone, Campanile was my favorite, but Ammo had a great vibe, and I craved their brown rice, the beet risotto at Il Pastel, along my commute home was unsurpassed, and the crispy tofu at Mandaret, the low-key Chinese bistro where in its prime I'd seen Warren and Annette eating, and Ian McKellen, and countless agents and execs, was sublime. For a great drink scene, few things beat the mix of rappers, agents, and actors lounging in the lobby bar at L'Ermitage. But I also loved the occasional dose of old Hollywood glamour. Sure, the chopped salad at La Scala was no better than anything you'd find in an airport kiosk, but where else could you eat it in giant red booths, surrounded by so much old-school facework? The Mandarin in Beverly Hills had a middling Chinese chicken salad, but its booths were right out of a Bond film, and you knew just about everyone in the place. There were places that offered nothing in terms of atmosphere, but were packed with Hollywood glitterati because they were perfectly situated, halfway between hubs like Culver City and Fox. I'm looking at you, Jack Spratz, in the Sawtell kitchen. And then there were those places where it all came together. Glamour, food, atmosphere, vibe. The Little Door, of course, comes to mind. Sitting on that romantic patio framed by a Moorish colonnade and getting steadily more drunk was really hard to beat. But the ultimate restaurant when it came to a Hollywood scene in the late 90s and early aughts was without question Les Deux Cafés. What makes one restaurant pop while another founders is hard to say. Café des Artistes, right around the corner, had an almost identical layout and menu and was a pleasant place to eat, but never hit the critical mass that Les Deux hit every single night. Maybe it was Michel Lamy, owner and host, lording over that craftsman bungalow like some kind of sorcerer, transforming with her dark magic an otherwise unassuming parking lot patio into some remote exotic boîte. The scene was like a dinner party, and it was not uncommon to hop between tables, between courses, or after you'd finished your meal. This was how one of my friends found herself trying to chat up Owen Wilson in his booth one night, only to have him turn to her, he was having a business dinner, and dismiss her with a cold, "Adios." When she didn't understand what he had said, he leveled her with a gaze and drew it out. Adios. Cold. But generally the vibe was convivial, and you'd find yourself after dinner dancing and chatting on the patio or in the bar with strangers and friends till the place shut down around 2 a.m. I'd like to think it was helpful to be seen out there on the town, but I really doubt it. While occasionally we did have a legitimate business person at dinner, writers and producers who were blowing up, I cannot remember a single bit of business or valuable connection that came out of our many nights at Les Deux. Still, eating out at the hottest restaurant in Hollywood week after week, drinking to the point of annihilation, was not cheap. It had to be justified. But you can only put Steve Gagin on your expense account so many times before you better make a movie with him. I was worried if I lied and put someone genuinely justifiable on the report, I might get called upon to work that relationship for the company's benefit. "Oh, I see you had dinner with Spike Jonze. Can you bring him in?" My colleagues were in the same bind. We had to justify this expense. We had to explain why it was so important to keep paying the dues to be part of the club. Thankfully, one night, when experimenting with a new spot that opened up on Sunset Boulevard, someone in our group ordered the pork loin, and it was served with a side of chewy dumpling-like noodles called spätzle. Pork loin on a bed of herb spätzle, it read. It was like our prayers had been answered, and from that point forward, whenever we had a big, boozy dinner of questionable business value, we claimed we'd been out with Hollywood's hottest new financier, Herb Spatzel, of Spatzel Entertainment.